All right, ready to dive into a medical mystery with a name you might need help pronouncing.
You know I love a good challenge. Lay it on me.
It's granulomatous cheilitis.
Okay, yeah, that's a mouthful. But it sounds serious. What is it?
It's a rare condition that causes some serious, and I mean serious, lip swelling. We're talking swelling that makes a spicy taco look like child's play. And get this, if it's left untreated, it can actually change the shape of your lips permanently.
Wow, okay, now I'm really intrigued. So we're not talking your average run-of-the-mill chapped lips here.
Not even close. And to make things even more interesting, a lot of times doctors can't even figure out what's causing it. They call it idiopathic.
Ah, the mystery deepens. So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, let's start with the basics. What does granulomatous cheilitis actually look and feel like? What's going on beneath the surface?
Imagine like when you get a splinter, you know that little red bump that pops up?
Yeah, I hate those.
Well, those are like mini versions of what we call granulomas. It's your body's way of fighting off something foreign, right? With this condition, it's like you're getting a bunch of these granulomas inside your lips, which is what causes that swelling and apparently a kind of rubbery feeling.
So instead of a splinter, my immune system is freaking out over what exactly? That's the million-dollar question.
You've got it. It's like your immune system is throwing a party in your lips, but nobody RSVP'd and we don't know the guest list.
That's a great analogy, but this isn't just a one-time party, is it? We're talking a long-term, unwelcome guest situation.
Exactly. This is chronic inflammation, not your average, oh, I ate something weird kind of swelling.
So for someone listening who's dealing with lip issues, it's important to recognize that this is different. It's not something to just ignore.
Absolutely. Knowing the difference between regular inflammation and this chronic type is huge. It's not just cosmetic. It's a sign that something else is going on.
Okay, so we've got this medical mystery on our hands. Where do doctors even begin to look for clues? What are the usual suspects when it comes to causing this kind of chronic inflammation?
Well, it really is like detective work. Doctors have to consider all sorts of possibilities. Allergies are a big one. Medications, too, believe it or not.
Huh?
And get this, even genetics can play a role.
Hold on, genetics. Are you telling me that my tendency for swollen lips could be inherited?
Hey, you never know. It's definitely possible. Think of it like this. You know how some families just seem to be prone to certain health issues?
Right, like heart disease runs in my family, unfortunately.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of similar with granulomatous cheilitis. The research is still ongoing, but that genetic link is definitely part of the puzzle.
I love these deep dives for a reason. Always something new and surprising. But okay, let's not forget those other potential culprits you mentioned, like allergies and medications. It's amazing how something that seems totally unrelated could show up in such a specific way.
It's incredible, isn't it? And you see that a lot with the immune system. It's so complex, and what causes a minor reaction in one person can manifest as something totally different in another.
It's like our bodies all have their own unique ways of reacting.
Yeah.
Speaking of unique reactions, the research mentioned some other conditions that seem to be linked to this, Crohn's disease and Melkerson-Rosenthal syndrome. What's the connection there?
That's a really important point for listeners to understand. While granulomatous cheilitis can be associated with these conditions, it definitely does not mean that everyone with lip swelling has them.
Okay, so no jumping to conclusions,
Exactly. It's about working with your doctor to get a clear picture of what's going on.
which conveniently leads us to our next section, where we'll explore the diagnosis process. But first, a quick break.
And we're back, hot on the trail of this medical mystery. So before the break, we were talking about how figuring out what's causing granulomatous cheilitis is like piecing together a puzzle.
It really is. It's not just about looking at the lips. It's about looking at the whole person, you know?
Okay, so no snap judgments based on a quick glance. What kind of things are doctors looking at to get to the bottom of this? Well, blood tests are a big one. They can tell us a lot about what's happening inside the body, like if there are any signs of, say, an autoimmune condition.
Autoimmune, there's that word again. It seems to be a recurring theme with this condition.
It definitely is. And that's why those blood tests can be so helpful. They can reveal if the immune system is acting up in other ways, which could be a clue.
So it's like looking for footprints at a crime scene, but instead of dirt, we're talking about your blood.
That's a good way to put it. And just like with a crime scene, we don't stop there. We've got to gather more evidence. Remember we talked about allergies?
Oh, right. Those were on the list of potential suspects.
Exactly. So allergy testing is another important piece of the puzzle.
Because sometimes the answer is as simple as figuring out what your body just doesn't like. Right. Kind of like when I found out I was lactose intolerant.
Yeah,
Mystery solved.
exactly. It's
Right.
all about connecting those dots. And speaking of connecting dots, there's this concept doctors use called differential diagnosis, which basically means they're ruling out other conditions that might look like granulomatous cheilitis.
So it's about being thorough, like a detective,
Yeah.
considering all the suspects.
Precisely. Because sometimes what looks like one thing on the surface could be something else entirely. It's about getting the full picture.
And I'm sure that's reassuring for anyone going through this, knowing their doctor is leaving no stone unturned. But let's talk about what it's actually like to live with this condition. I mean, we've established it's chronic, it can flare up. That's got to be frustrating. What does the research say about managing those ups and downs? You're telling me chronic and prone to flare-ups. That sounds like a recipe for frustration. So let's get to the good stuff. What can people do to actually manage this thing?
Well, if I had a magic wand to make it disappear completely, I'd be using it right now, believe me.
I bet. But no magic wand needed. I'm sure there are ways to manage the symptoms and keep those flare-ups in check, right?
You're right, there are. One of the most effective treatments out there is actually something you've probably heard of. Corticosteroids.
Oh yeah, those are used for all kinds of things, aren't they?
They are. And for good reason, they're like the superheroes of reducing inflammation. They work by calming down your immune system's overreaction, which in turn reduces the swelling and discomfort.
So they basically tell that out-of-control immune system party to pack it up.
Exactly. But like any good superhero, they come with a warning label. They're powerful and need to be used carefully, always under the guidance of a doctor.
Makes sense. Gotta love responsible superheroing.
Mm.
But what about long-term strategies? What can people do on a daily basis to prevent those flare-ups in the first place?
Now you're thinking. And you're not going to be surprised to hear this, but diet plays a huge role.
Okay, lay it on me. What kind of dietary changes are we talking about?
Focusing on those anti-inflammatory foods is key. Loading up on fruits, veggies, healthy fats, that kind of thing.
Music to my ears. And it's probably not just about adding the good stuff, but also about cutting back on the not-so-good stuff,
You
right?
got it. And that includes being mindful of potential allergens. We talked about how allergies can be a trigger for some people, so it's all about paying attention to your body's signals, figuring out what doesn't agree with you, and maybe even keeping a food diary to track any patterns.
It's like being your own health detective.
Yeah.
So interesting. But before we wrap things up, I think it's really important for everyone listening to remember that we're not medical professionals. This information is great for understanding the basics, but it's not a replacement for seeing a doctor.
100% agree. If something in this deep dive clicks for you, if you're nodding along like, yep, that's me, don't hesitate to reach out to a healthcare professional. They're the ones who can give you a proper diagnosis, personalized treatment, and the support you need.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive into granulomatous cheilitis has been fascinating. We've covered those mysterious granulomas, played medical detective with potential causes, and even uncovered some ways to manage those pesky symptoms. But as always, we like to leave you with something to think about. We talked about how this condition can sometimes be linked to Crohn's disease. Well, some researchers think that in some cases, granulomatous cheilitis might actually be an early warning sign for Crohn's.
Wow, really? That's
Wow.
wild.
Right. It's like what's happening in your mouth could be a clue to something bigger going on in your body. It's still being researched, but definitely something to keep in mind.
It really underscores just how connected everything is. Pretty amazing, if you ask me.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of granulomatous cheilitis. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little curiosity about our bodies can go a long way. Until next time.